our faith that he can give the money to the right businesses and it actually has economic growth. There actually will help, Here's Dana D. Kelly talking about the Job Creation Index. Look at this article. And the reason I like this article is because it is pulling information from our good friends Jacob Bundrick and Thomas Snyder from the Arkansas Center for Research and Economics. Specifically, this has to do with the Mercatus Center and the paper that was published by them. But anyway, Dana D. Kelly writes that feelings and facts may start with the same letter, but they are often as far apart as alpha and omega. A case in point is the rather sobering findings from a recent statistical study of Arkansas's Quick Action Closing Fund. Now, this is a fund, ladies and gentlemen, that is a slush fund, in my opinion. And the governor gets to use it. And he gets to use this as a way to sweeten the deals that he's already making with our money, picking winners and losers. Come to Arkansas and I'll give you some of my Quick Action Closing Fund. So, this article goes on, talks about economic development. That's what they claim. This is a tool for economic development. But then the question is asked, but has it done so? Has it actually worked? Does the Quick Action Closing Fund, picking winners and losers, does it actually help the economy grow? Does it actually give what the most people in the media report the day you get to announce the deal? The day you announce the deal, Asa stands there and he gets all of this credit, and maybe the average person says, oh, wow, yes, he's doing his job. But what if the policy, what if it doesn't work? What if it's all a lie? Let me say it again. What if it's all one big lie? And that lie is being used to promote the political career of the person in office. And what if they're using taxpayer money to do it? Essentially to prop their political career up, to make people think that they're growing the economy when in reality, they're just burning through your cash. What if that's the reality? What if the reality is it's all a big lie? It's all a big scam. That's the question I want to ask you guys right now. Is it? Well, listen to this piece. Listen to this. The story goes on. The justifying question was the very subject of the Mercatus Center project paper published by Jacob Bundrick and Thomas Snyder. Do business subsidies lead to increased economic activity? The first order of analysis of the study was where Quick Action Closing Fund money went. From inception in 2007 to the end of the calendar year in 2015, some $102 million was dispersed to companies in 24 of Arkansas's 75 counties. 5 of those counties, Pulaski, Faulkner, Washington, Craighead, and Sebastian, received 3/4 of the fund's total distributions. And this is from the paper. Given that not all of Arkansas's counties have had companies within their borders receive Quick Action Closing Fund subsidies, it is natural to ask whether differences exist between the counties where subsidized projects have taken place and the counties where they have not taken place. The study analyzed the 2 sets of counties using various measures, means, and averages in median household income, unemployment rate, private employment, and establishment growth, and more. Certain correlations were unsurprising. Most of the funds went to wealthier and more populous areas, which is where most larger companies and employers are located. Counties with Quick Action Closing Fund
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
I mean, if you really think about it, they should be called the Philadelphia Patriots, right? I mean, if you really think about it, if we want to be historically, I mean, where were the Patriots? Yes, New England. Yes, I understand that. I'm just saying, if we really wanted to get technical about it, we'd be talking about Philadelphia. But anyway, that's sure to make a lot of people mad. It was a pretty good Super Bowl. Pretty good, right? I mean, if I'm honest, I didn't stay up and watch the whole thing because I just didn't have that much interest. But I know a lot of people out there, tuned in. I don't think I watched an NFL game the entire year, if I'm honest. But, this was a thing. Me and the family, we went to a Super Bowl party with friends, and that was fun. I think I spent more time, talking than I did actually watching the game. I think that's the way most people were. But anyway, everybody, the reviews, everybody said it was an amazing game. And, of course, the Philadelphia Eagles winning their first Super Bowl. Now, Joe, I was, I was not at a party that was really focused on the game as much as it was more just about socializing and having good conversation, which is, was refreshing, actually. So I didn't really get to watch any of the commercials, but I heard from some family that, lives in another part of the country that they were really not funny at all. Is this true? They weren't funny?
Yeah, for the most part, they weren't funny. It was just me and my roommate sitting at our apartment. We didn't get invited anywhere, but we really didn't care.
I feel terrible.
We didn't care. We really didn't care. We just wanted to watch the game. So we watched the game and the commercials. The commercials weren't funny. The ones that caught me that I thought were really funny were the Tide commercials because they were so random and just so seemingly out of place. Because it'd be like it would run as if it was a typical. There was one specifically that started out. It would run as a typical Super Bowl commercial, but out of nowhere, they were like, it's a Tide commercial. You see all these clean shirts? Yeah. It's a Tide commercial. And then they ran with that gag for probably another 20 seconds, and it was really funny. And it made me question if everything was a Tide commercial for the rest of the night.
And I thought the Tide placements were odd just because you have so many kids now, that are doing the Tide Pod Challenge where they're actually eating detergent.
I told my roommate that it's weird,
right?
The meme of the Tide Pod is being more perpetuated and more being made fun of now than ever, and it's gonna get worse after this.
But what about for the most part, though? I mean, do you agree that the commercials just were not funny?
I don't think they were on the level of years past.
Okay. It seems like the ones that I did see seem to be focused on inequality.
Yeah, there's a lot of social justice based commercials, to be honest, this year, more than I've ever seen in my life, which is crazy.
It's odd.
Yeah, because one of my favorite Super Bowl commercials from the last few years is it comes from someone who's definitely on the left. It was the pistachio commercial with Stephen Colbert.
That one was
funny.
Hilarious.
Yeah. Because the first one that ever hit me was it started out with Stephen Colbert in a room that he said pistachio like 3 times in the entire 30-second commercial. Went, yeah. So I think we're gonna wrap this commercial up because pistachio sales are about to go through the roof. He goes, I think that's it. You good? And he looks over at this eagle, and the eagle kind of nods. They play one ad, and they come back, or after that ad ends, they come back to Stephen Colbert in the exact same room, except there's a lot of pistachio-colored stuff, like the green color. And he's just like, well, pistachio sales have not risen 300% in the last 30 seconds. So we're going to plug a little bit more. It's pistachio, pistachio, pistachio. And then he takes his head and rips it open as if it's like a pistachio shell and goes, pistachio. And his head is a pistachio.
So
that's one of the funniest ones to me.
Yeah, so no commercials like that this year, though.
Absolutely not. Yeah. Not that I saw it.
The social justice ones were strange, and it didn't make much sense to me. Anyway, but the game was good. That's supposedly why you watch in the first place. So on Friday, by the way, good morning, everybody. So on Friday, we had a good show, but we did not get to cover the memo. We previewed it a little bit, but the House Intelligence Committee voted to release the memo. It went to Donald Trump, and then it went back. And so, I mean, now some people are referring to it as Memo Gate. Was it really all that it was cracked up to be? Was it really all the hype? Did it live up to the hype? I think it did. I really do. I know there's some people that do not, but you can take a few observations from this memo, and I guess it was soon after Donald Trump won the election in 2016, you started to hear this phrase, and it was called the deep state. The deep state this, the deep state that. And really, if I were to define that for you, the general idea behind the deep state is that our government, the United States of America, is not a monolithic government, that within the agencies and the bureaucracies of people that are holdovers from one Republican administration to a Democrat administration to a Republican and vice versa, that within that construct there are people who are agencies that maybe pursue completely different goals than you would think. That you have agencies themselves, whether it or under the executive branch, maybe whether it's the State Department, whether it's the FBI, whether it's the CIA, whatever, that potentially, I'm just telling you, here's the idea, that potentially go rogue or pursue different agendas and this, that. And in this case, the deep state was being used to say there is some portion of the United States government that is working together against a duly elected, legitimately elected president of the United States and Donald Trump. That is what the phrase the deep state that we've heard over the last year or so is meant to convey. And so that's why this New York Post piece by Michael Goodwin, it really stuck out to me about the memo. And what he says is that this memo, the GOP released, proves that the deep state is in fact real. And I would tend to agree with this. And the fact that the Democrat Party, they were dishonest when they were saying that if you release the memo, it jeopardizes national security. There's nothing in the memo that reveals sources, methods, stuff like that. It doesn't jeopardize national security. So you have the Democrats who are willing to lie just to try to fearmonger, and then you have the media that was going along with it, and they're still going along with it. And this is what Michael Goodwin says at the New York Post, quote, "Thanks to the battle over the memo, we also know with 100% certainty that the mainstream media is part of the swamp. The efforts by the New York Times and Washington Post, among others, to keep the memo from ever seeing the sunshine were appalling." Okay, listen to this. Before it saw the memo, the New York Times editorial page called it proof of the Republican plot against the FBI. A Washington Post columnist warned President Trump he would be making a historic mistake in releasing it. Quote, this is from Eugene Robinson, "Presidents don't win fights with the FBI," seemingly endorsing the blackmailing habits of the disgraced J. Edgar Hoover. He goes on, Michael Goodwin, New York Post, "Oddly, the campaign of those papers coincided with the celebration of their roles in releasing the Pentagon Papers nearly 50 years ago, which is a huge example of hypocrisy if you take the historical view of this. Let's get to what the actual memo said, right? The details of the memo make a strong case that current and former officials committed crimes by misleading FISA court judges in seeking 4 surveillance warrants against Carter Page, a bit player in the Trump campaign orbit. Those details seal the sordid legacy of former FBI Director James Comey. He signed off on 3 warrant requests, reportedly without informing the judges that the essential piece of evidence against Page was the infamous Russian dossier paid for by Hillary Clinton's campaign and the Democratic National Committee, which now that we know that they rigged the Democrat primary, Debbie Wasserman Schultz and all of that, Hillary Clinton's campaign and the Democrat National Committee are synonymous entities. They're the same thing. So that's an important fact to keep in mind here, ladies and gentlemen. Months later, Comey himself told Congress the dossier was salacious and unverified, yet was secretly willing to use it in court against Page. Now, let's just stop right there for a second. It was Donald Trump, it was President Trump that said and was criticized and made fun of by the media. He tweeted out last year that he was spied on, that he was wiretapped. They had Trump Tower wiretapped and everything else, okay? His campaign was in fact spied on. That is a true statement because, I mean, it's very safe to say that's exactly what he was referring to, was all the information we have now is what he had. Now, in the hindsight of now looking back and seeing him fire James Comey, can you blame him from firing James Comey if he knew this? If Donald Trump knew that James Comey admits that the memo is salacious and inaccurate, and he knew that Comey knew that, and he also knew that Comey signed the FISA warrants to unmask and monitor members of his campaign, is it any wonder why he fired James Comey? And let me say something personally about James Comey, because back before any of this stuff happened with the Hillary Clinton press conference and him coming out and exonerating her, but at the same time saying that, she wasn't grossly negligent, but she was extremely careless. And of course, now we know that they edited those documents. That was what Peter Strzok that was editing those documents, taking out the clear crime of grossly negligent, replacing it with extremely careless. I thought James Comey was potentially a guy with integrity. And the only reason I ever thought that was but now in hindsight, it looks horrible for Comey. But back during the Bush administration, James Comey was the Deputy Attorney General under John Ashcroft. And John Ashcroft got very, very sick. And so there was a provision of the Patriot Act that was about to expire. And Ashcroft and Comey had written basically this memo saying, this is how ironic this is, saying, no, this portion of the Patriot Act does need to expire because we don't have constitutional authority under the Fourth Amendment to continue this, right? So James Comey testifies, and you know who was asking the questions in the main testimony? Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer was the one asking the questions here, and they were all about the Fourth Amendment back then. They were all about it. You go back and look this up, because I spent a great deal of time on this several years ago because I was fascinated by it. I was fascinated by somebody within a Republican administration sticking to their principles. I thought that's what James Comey was doing. And because he was basically testifying against the Bush administration when he was in fact working for the Bush administration. In hindsight, it's all just one big deep state, isn't it? It is. It's one big deep state. But anyway, he testified that George W. Bush and at the time Alberto Gonzales, who wasn't the Attorney General yet, they go to Ashcroft on his deathbed, so they thought. They try to get him to sign off on this thing. He refuses. Comey tells this harrowing story about how he got in the car and he ran up to the hospital to try to save John Ashcroft from signing something that he wasn't consciously willing to sign. I mean, the way he described it, it was like he was Michael Corleone running up to the hospital to try to save his dad from the coming mob assassination. And he describes all of this, and that's why I thought James Comey was actually a guy of principle, because I thought, he was doing all this for the Fourth Amendment and yada, yada, yada. How ironic that if you go back and listen to that testimony, back in whatever it was, probably 2004, something like that. Certainly was after September the 11th. That this is what now Comey is signing off on, using phony dossiers to spy on people you disagree with politically. It is unbelievable what this dossier, or what this whole situation reveals. But again, what Goodwin says is this confirms the existence of the deep state. Okay? When you look at the fact that Christopher Steele, the author of the memo, was hired by the FBI, then he was fired when he shared his dossier with the press and lied about it. He also confided to an agent that he loathed President Trump, was passionate about him not being president. Okay? Then we have a question, Michael Goodwin. Did the agent Bruce Orr, whose wife worked for the same firm as Steele, Fusion GPS, tell the judges everything that they needed to about Christopher Steele and the dossier? Did Comey? The memo says that the answer is no, by the way. The memo says that they concealed the true nature of this dossier from the FISA court. Without knowing that partisan link, the court was deprived of evidence that would have called into question the surveillance request. Indeed, the memo claims that Andrew McCabe, the former deputy FBI director removed for his conduct during the separate Clinton investigation, testified that no warrant would have been sought without the Steele dossier information. Not incidentally, current FBI Director Christopher Wray and his team read the memo before it was released and did not dispute McCabe's claim. That's why McCabe was asked to resign immediately last week as soon as they read this memo. So you tell me, is the deep state real? I think it is. How many tributaries are there? I would say there's a lot more. What is clear to me is that, and this is what is staggeringly frustrating, the inner workings of our government, as much as we would love to believe they all drop politics and we move along and we respect the Constitution and the rule of law, it seems like there are other loyalties beyond the United States of America, and our government's not monolithic, and there does appear to be a struggle. There appears to be a struggle. With the direction, and the holdovers do not want to change. The swamp, they are resisting. He is really draining the swamp, though. I mean, he is really draining the swamp if you think about it. Or he's attempting to. We'll see what happens. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. Good morning to you. Thanks for starting the beginning of your day and week with us here. This is the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. My name is Paul Harrell. We got a great show for you. We got a lot to get to. I'm going to explain the new whiteboard we have up for the week when we come back. Don't go anywhere. Back in a moment.
In Arkansas, every single hour there is a politician not getting what they want. For some, it's an absolute nightmare. The sleepless nights wondering if progress will ever come. Lying awake pondering how to grow government in this political climate. Asking questions like, why don't my constituents want to pay a few cents more in taxes? Everyday politicians feel abused and neglected. These politicians are starving for power. They're hungry, confused, and they don't understand why no one seems to care. Will you be a patriot and commit today to help these poor, starved for power public officials? It's simple. All you have to do is commit to stay silent and never dissent or stand in the way of your politicians' rise to power. Never speak up or get engaged to stop the growth of government. By committing to these simple steps, you will ensure the life of your politician will be filled with contentment and the respect they are desperately seeking, as well as campaign contributions from lobbyists.
This message brought to you by Aristocrats Serving Arkansas.
PHP Parody. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
Yeah, we're building it, but don't think that you're not part of the construction. Because we need every single one of you out there, every single one of you that wants government to shrink and liberty to grow. We need your help. And really the opposite is happening under the leadership of Governor Asa Hutchinson. I don't care what he said on Fox and Friends. There's another poll out where now he's the 8th most popular governor. He was the 3rd. Now he's the 8th. He was on Fox News. Finally, Governor Asa Hutchinson, he goes on Fox News during an election year. When it's not an election year, he goes on MSNBC and CNN and is used as a Republican pawn to make other Republicans like Donald Trump look bad. Oh, man, he finally went on Fox News, and he was bragging about how Tim on Facebook writes, Asa was on Fox this morning bragging about being the 8th most popular governor. He touted the largest tax cut in Arkansas history, mandating computer programming in high schools, and reaching across the aisles to Dems. Wow, he said that. I'll have to go look that up. He actually said we're reaching across the aisles to Democrats? Huh. Interesting. By the way, the largest tax cut in Arkansas history, the bar has to be pretty low on that, right? Considering Democrats have been in control and we're the highest tax state around any of our other states. So, yeah, carefully crafted language. It's all campaign speak. Don't buy it. But what you can buy is this. This is what our whiteboard says this week. It says elite habits. Elite habits. Now, what do I mean by that? What do I mean by elite habits? Well, honestly, the elite refer to those who, and I saw a little bit of this on social media this week, they are getting very condescending, the elite. And it's I'll tell you the first thing it is a defense mechanism. The elite are becoming very condescending about anyone who's pointing out the fact that establishment Republicans have grown government, they have increased spending, they have raised taxes, and they're becoming very condescending at those of us who want to point that out, who are pointing out that the Republican Party platform is meaningless for those in positions of power. It only serves to give them power, and then they forget about it. And they're very defensive. And you know why? Because they're elite. And if things were to change, for example, if Jan Morgan were to beat Asa, there'd be a lot of these elitists who would lose influence and lose power. And that's why they're so condescending right now on social media and everything else. And that's the first thing that I've noticed. The second thing that this is meant to convey, elite habits, is that they have a habit now. It is now a habit of being allergic to true conservatism. You see, back in 2013, when the Republicans had a slim majority and they went along with the governor, Beebe at the time, the Democrats, speaking about working across party lines, and they expanded Obamacare, they embraced Obamacare, they set up this whole crony capitalistic thing with Blue Cross Blue Shield. Well, we were told, we're Republicans, but we just disagree on this one issue. And then, now, in 2018, we have a larger view. We can see that a habit is formed. It wasn't just that one issue. It was also on tax policy. It was also on regulatory reform. Back in just a moment. projects showed more population and household income growth than counties without projects, but that's an intrinsic quality for the state's wealthier counties anyway, meaning if you're already a population center compared to, you already have those things. You already have higher household income and just other metrics that are going to indicate prosperity. So Dana Kelly goes on here. In order to try and determine the fund's effectiveness as a program, the researchers looked specifically at private employment per 1,000 population and private establishments per 1,000 population, which, with regard to the quick action closing fund subsidies provided to businesses within a given county in $100,000 increments or units. Controlling for factors such as labor cost, workforce education level, rural population density, county wealth, and age and racial makeup of populations, the study found there to be no statistical difference over a 4-year period in either the employment or establishment model in counties receiving quick action closing fund subsidies. It may all be a lie, folks. This is what I said. What if it's all a lie? It may very well be. I'm convinced that it is, obviously. I think the Arkansas Department of Economic Development shouldn't even exist. And if you treat all businesses with lower taxes and less regulations, you do something like eliminate the corporate income tax, folks, people would actually want to move here without getting special treats. Now, look, I know other states give special treats, but the question here is it effective? Is this actually effective for our economy? You know, Donald Trump just gave an entire speech last night where he was focused on us. He made sure he knew, or he made sure we all knew, at least his claim is, that everything he does, according to what he said, his claim is everything he does, he has Americans on his mind when he does it. He wants to make sure it's in the best interest of Americans, and that means all Americans. Across all races, backgrounds, ethnicities, all of that. Creeds. Yeah, he said creeds. How refreshing that was. And then he said, you know what? Americans are dreamers too. So refreshing. The question is, from that economic standpoint, are you going to really spend Americans' money, Arkansans' money, if it's not getting the results that you claim in the media reports? Oh, it'll create 75 jobs.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, so we're going to get some announcements real quick. I saw this on social media over the weekend. Jan Morgan's upcoming events. If you do want to hear her speak, I would encourage you to do so you can make an informed decision if you do plan to vote in the Republican Party primary between Asa Hutchinson and Jan Morgan. This Saturday, this is already over, but this past Saturday, she was at Heber Springs. But tonight, Monday, she's going to be in Jonesboro at the Northeast Arkansas Tea Party at 2405 East Highland Drive, starting at 6 p.m. Then on Wednesday, February 7th, she's going to be on the other side of the state in Fort Smith, a meet and greet at the Senior Activity Center. That's at 6 p.m., and that is at 2700 Kavanaugh Road in Fort Smith. Then she will be in Yellville, 7 p.m., the Marion County Courthouse, Thursday, February the 8th. So she's got a busy week this week. That's the Marion County Courthouse in Yellville, Thursday, February the 8th, 7 o'clock. That's 300 East Old Main Street. Then this coming Saturday, February 10th, Jan will be at Mount Ida, the second annual Reed Matthews Memorial Hunt at the Montgomery County Fairgrounds at 11:30 a.m., and then she's going over to Warren Monday, February the 12th. So a week from today, we'll be in Warren. Meet and greet at Baker's Western Way, 205 East Cedar Street. That's at 4 p.m. Then a week from that Monday, February the 12th. The same Monday, February the 12th. So you got two events. At 6:30, she'll be in Monticello at the Southeast Arkansas Tea Party, 181 U.S. Highway 425 South. Then the next Tuesday, February 13th, she'll be in Nashville, Howard County Republican Committee meeting, 7 o'clock, 1765 South 4th Street. Then on Thursday, February 15th, she'll be at Rogers at Copeland's Don Overstreet, 463 North 46th Street at 6 p.m. Then on Thursday, February 22nd, she'll be in Whitehall, the Jefferson County Republican Committee, 7401 Dollarway Road, Suite 114 at 6 p.m. Saturday, February 24th, Jan Morgan will be in Fordyce. And this will be interesting. Jeremy Sullivan Feral Hog Roundup, 1:30 p.m. That's the Old Armory, 101 South Main Street. And then on Monday, February 26th, she'll be in Ozark, 7 p.m., the County Rep Committee, First Presbyterian Church, the County Republican Committee there, 204 North 4th Street. Anyway, check that. You can see that graphic there. We have it up on Facebook.com/Conduit News. And she's certainly making the rounds. I guess Governor Asa Hutchinson will be right behind her, visiting all those places, trying to undo what is a perceived damage. It's real damage, but you know what I mean. You see what I'm going there. It's perception versus reality. And speaking of that, back to our whiteboard here. Our whiteboard this week, again, it says elite habits. And what do I mean by that? Well, of course, I mean the establishment elite and their habits. Originally, they told us as Republicans took control of the state legislature away from the Democrats for the first time in 138 years. You know what they said? They said, we are Republicans, we believe in limited government, we're conservatives, but on this one issue of Obamacare, on this one issue, a few of us Republicans and all the Democrats and Mike Beebe, we've got to find a way to make something happen. We got to find a way to grow this government. And I know you don't like it, but we're going to grow it now so we can shrink it later. Just trust us. Just please trust us. And, we still are going to agree on these other issues, but we're going to have to embrace Obamacare in Arkansas. We're going to have to grow government the largest it's ever been grown in Arkansas history. And that's what a minority of Republicans that had a very slim majority and the rest of the Democrats and Mike Beebe did in 2013. And we were just told we were saying it's not a habit. It's not a habit. It's just on this one issue. But now, see, that was in 2013, and now we're in 2018. And we've had 5 years of Republican leadership almost. And where are we? Do we have meaningful tax reform? No, not anything bold, just kind of cutting, trimming around the edges. We're told $150 million is a lot of money in tax cuts, when in reality it's not. And by the way, let's just take it for what it is. The governor has increased spending $610 million, and he's cut your taxes by $150 million. Has government grown, or has government decreased in size? You tell me. If we've increased spending $610 million and cut taxes by $150, if we hadn't increased spending by $610 million, what could we have cut taxes for? It would have been a lot more. So it doesn't make any sense. But the interesting thing is the elite now have formed a habit. These establishment elites at the Marble Palace, they're now in the habit. It's no longer one issue. The habit is, okay, well, Obamacare, whatever. But then they come out for more tax increases on tires. They try to raise your taxes on the internet. They successfully create a new tax on digital downloads, giving them a new foothold. We're going to talk more about that at 7:30 because I want to talk about the military retirement supposed tax cut. If the government gets more money when it's all said and done, is it really a tax cut? That's the question. Or is it just tax shifting? We've got to increase the taxes on this person so we can decrease the taxes on this person over there. I don't think so. If the government gets more money, it's a tax increase, actually. It's pretty easy to determine. Unless you're using hospital math, then it can be kind of hard to cut through the carefully crafted calculations. Carefully crafted calculations. Oh, my goodness. So let me give you a broader example about the elite habits, shall we? If you really want to know the habits of the elite, it wasn't just a one-time deviation from conservative principles when they embraced Obamacare. That wasn't a one-time thing. We now have a history of almost 5 years. This is a flashback to September 18th, conduitforaction.org, in defense of Governor Asa Hutchinson. This is a sarcastic piece. I'm going to tell you that right up front. In defense of Governor Asa Hutchinson, you know, people keep saying Asa's not a real Republican. If you are a Republican and use Facebook or other social media, you probably have seen people posting such comments. You may have heard similar comments in private conversations. Despite Conduit for Action's disagreements with our governor, we think it's necessary to stand up for his defense. Not. To explain, we will identify some of the areas that gave rise to the assertions. After listing some, we will explain why they are wrong in saying he is not a real Republican. Some fiscal conservatives claim Asa is not a real Republican for positions such as. Now, keep in mind, these are Asa's positions, but this is also the elite establishment that continue to follow and support these. So this is on the Republican Party as well. The brand of the Republican Party is really damaged right now because of Jake Files, John Woods, Mike and Neil, and I think more to come. But more importantly, they did not call for Jake Files to resign when we knew everything that he's pled guilty to. We've known it for quite some time, and they refused to do it. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. But let's talk about fiscal issues. Tax increases. The governor opposed giving an income tax break on military retirement pay unless the bill included increased taxes on the rest of the state to offset any reduced tax collection. The bill he supported and helped pass included a military retirement pay exemption and a tax break for soft drink manufacturers while imposing more taxes on us, which not only makes up for the tax break, but also increases taxes by a projected $5.9 million annually. Now, I know nephew number one doesn't like that because he says that's wrong, but your budgetary sleight of hand doesn't work, and I'll explain more at 7:30 today, 7:33. More tax increases. The governor signed into law a special tax increase on new tires and a new special tax on used tires to fund growing government to monitor tires from the initial sale through disposal or cradle to grave. More taxes demanded. The Arkansas House of Representatives rejected a sales tax on the internet and higher gas and diesel taxes, thankfully. Governor Hutchinson vowed to fight on in his support of the taxes. A revenue now that's an example where you had enough conservatives stand up and say no. So we do have small victories here where they are trying to break the elite habits, okay? Revenue problem, not a spending problem. When Governor Asa Hutchinson had to make some cuts in his increased budget for the 2016-2017 fiscal year, the governor claimed it was a revenue problem and not a spending problem. This is an interesting one, awarding contracts to the highest bidder. Despite a recent state money problems, an ever-increasing state budget, and legislative opposition, Governor Hutchinson awarded a 3-year contract for information technology services for the DHS in the amount of $75.3 million instead of to the contractor bidding $54.4 million. The question is, in picking the higher bidder, how much of that $75.3 million ends up in a form of a campaign contribution? What about the money giveaway to private colleges despite months of public criticism over individual legislators giving state general improvement funds to a private college? And after the governor had to cut his overly optimistic general revenue budget, the governor gave $150,000 in emergency funds to 3 private colleges in Pulaski County, the Arkansas Baptist College, Philander Smith College, and Shorter College. Picking winners and losers, the governor continues to pick winners and losers by giving away state funds to private businesses, ranging from a Taekwondo center, which was I hear is a really, really nice dojo that they put in North Little Rock. I mean, I hear it's real nice. all the way to a steel mill seeking to become a competitor to an existing Arkansas steel mill. Governor Hutchinson supported continued authority for the two parts of Obamacare that needed state action: Obamacare Medicaid expansion and the authority for a state-run Obamacare exchange. Now, this was back in September of last year when this article was written. He calls his Obamacare Medicaid expansion by the name Arkansas Works. Then there's more Obamacare. Governor Hutchinson criticized congressional efforts to repeal and replace Obamacare, wanting to keep much of it. This is when he went on MSNBC and things like that. Now, there are people in the establishment Republican elite who are very condescending, who are very upset when you point this out. They don't want limited government, okay, so much so that it means Asa would lose power because they would lose power. We are seeing people, so-called conservatives, compromising their principles, and I really don't know, and I honestly don't know how. The only way, I don't know how you guys can continue to do it. I really don't. How you can continue to support the direction we're going, because it's not it's not going where we all told the voters we wanted to go. We're going in the opposite direction with the current leadership. Now, you can say we have victories here or there, but if you'll notice, all the victories that I just cited were defensive victories because they were trying to raise our taxes. They have formed a habit of being allergic to the principles of the Republican Party. And organizations like Conduit get labeled far right when the only thing we're talking about are what these people campaign on inside the platform of a Republican Party. Very frustrating. Why not be honest with people? If you don't believe in the platform, don't run as a Republican. All right. What else we got here? Some social conservatives. Now, here this is very interesting here. This is very interesting here. Let's look at these issues. This is huge. I still can't believe that this happened, but in 2015, do what? This is huge. In 2015, Governor Hutchinson stopped a religious freedom restoration bill that had passed both houses in the Arkansas General Assembly. He didn't want to go on record as vetoing the religious freedom bill. There were LGBT protesters at the Capitol. I understand one of the governor's relatives was like, you don't need to sign that bill. And, you know, there was LGBT protesters in Indiana, and it was just it was a mess. And instead of taking advantage and using this controversy to educate the masses and stand up for the majority of Arkansans and say, you know what, religious freedom and people who are men of conviction and conscience, they have been a protected class in this country since 1789, and we are not going to deviate from the concept of religious liberty and personal conviction. That is the message Asa Hutchinson should have given, but instead he didn't, and he caved to the LGBTRSTLNE would you like to buy a vowel community. He didn't want to go on record as vetoing the bill. So he demanded the bill be recalled and another bill be drafted. Then they hijacked Senator Gary Stubblefield's bill against his will because they had already filed all the bill numbers that they could file in the session. So instead, they crafted a weaker bill, and many of the co-sponsors of the first bill were offended and refused to sponsor the weaker bill and didn't vote for the weaker bill. Not all of the co-sponsors, not all of this. I mean, it was an example of where you should have called. The Republicans should have called him out, and that was your first thing. That's the reason why Asa has a stranglehold, because I'm going to tell you something. If the rank and file Republicans can't stand up to Asa Hutchinson on social issues, which are the low-hanging fruit in this state when it comes to getting people to agree with you on, what hope do we have for them to stand up to Asa on tax policy or regulatory reform or and we're going to get into this later in the week, but this farm, this hog farm up on the Buffalo River that's being harassed by the Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality, which is Asa Hutchinson's agency, which, and folks, what we're going to find out is that we have people in our government who are listening to George Soros-funded Sierra Club over in California more than they're looking out for the well-being of Arkansans. Well, we're going to find that out later in the week, and you're going to want to stay tuned to it because it's ridiculous. But at this point, we are beginning to see a pattern or a habit, if you will, of the elite and what they really think of us right here in little old Arkansas. It gets worse. What about this habit? The Sharia law. The governor didn't sign HB 1941 of 2017 to prohibit the use of Sharia law in Arkansas courts. It became law without his signature, and he fought at every step of the way to get it to his. He didn't want to get it to his desk. And if it wasn't for State Representative Brant Smith, who kept pushing this bill, and if it wasn't the masterful testimony of Colonel Paul Deckert from the Center for Security Policy, it wouldn't have gotten passed. Really thankful for the folks at the Center for Security Policy for stepping up, sending somebody down like Colonel Paul Deckert to testify on that bill, because that was in both the House and the Senate. You couldn't argue with him because he knows what we're facing here. He knows how precious the Bill of Rights is and how other civilizations that are completely the opposite of Western civilization, we cannot allow those laws to be legitimized at all. And there have been instances where they have been. And Asa didn't want anything to do with it. Why? Because they're just like with the LGBT. There were people protesting who said this was anti-Islam and anti-freedom and everything else. And it's like, no, we have our laws, and we're going. And yet he didn't want to do anything controversial that would have required him to take questions from a predictably hostile press. And that is the biggest problem that I see with Governor Hutchinson, is he refuses to take on he refuses to take issues where he will get hostile questions from the press. I mean, and that's why the press is so nice to him, because he's not really doing. When the press turns on Asa Hutchinson, you will know real things are being done, like real conservative policy is being achieved. When John Brumman is truly unhappy with who the governor is, you will know true reform is in the works. Sanctuary campuses, the governor opposed HB 1042 of 2017 to prohibit the creation of sanctuary college campuses in Arkansas. The bill did not pass. Of course, sanctuary college campuses are a real thing. We're trying to say Arkansas is not going to join this. We have sanctuary cities, which is going to be Donald Trump's air traffic control crisis that Reagan faced. It's going to be the equivalent. Just mark my words on that. That is coming down the pike. With Donald Trump and the Justice Department going to have to face off with people who are just openly, trying to say you can violate federal law and our city is not going to do anything about it. Then, of course, the governor opposed SB 744 of 2017, which would have limited bathrooms in schools and other buildings to one sex. What a crazy idea, saying one sex can go in this bathroom and one sex can go in that bathroom. That bill did not pass, but the governor opposed it. See, these are the habits, I'm telling you. When you look at the sanctuary campus bill and the bathrooms, those bills failed to get to his desk because Asa got the Republicans on board. And the habit that you see is one where we try to limit what gets to the governor's desk that he truly disagrees with because he's not a conservative. Then, of course, you have the Second Amendment, which he has a terrible record on. He taking this photo with Moms Demand Action during the whole gun debate, and we know what happened with that and how true conservative ideas weren't even allowed to be heard because of nephew number two. Nephew number two, the head of the Judiciary Committee. We've got to take a break. I've gone way over here, but my point is, our whiteboard this week says elite habits. It's no longer one issue. We're not talking about, well, we're all Republicans and we just disagree on Medicaid expansion. No, now, that was 2013. This is now. We have a long record, a long train of abuses and usurpations, and we can tell that this is now a habit of being allergic to what you campaigned on. We got to go to break. Back in just a moment.
Buy, sell, and trade at Triple R Pawn in Ash Flat. Firearms, computers, sporting goods, musical instruments, tools, jewelry, and everything else you can think of. It's all at Triple R Pawn at the Light in Ash Flat. Gun enthusiasts, log on now to TripleRPawn.com and browse their amazing inventory. That's TripleRPawn.com. You can also call them at 870-994-PAWN. That's 870-994-7296. Let the great team at Triple R Pawn help you find what you're looking for. That's Triple R Pawn at the Light in Ash Flat, TripleRPawn.com, or call 870-994-PAWN.
Welcome to the Arkansas Obamacare Hotline. We would be more than happy to help you enroll in Arkansas Obamacare today. We just need a little information about you. Let's get started. If you're disabled, pregnant, or looking for medical care for your child, the program is currently full, and there's no doctors to see you. Please hang up now. If you're an able-bodied adult, please press 1. If you're currently employed, we're sorry, but you most likely do not qualify for the program. Please quit your job and call back later. If you don't work and instead play video games all day with your cats in your grandmother's basement, please press 1. If you've never lived in Arkansas, press 1. If you currently live in another state, press 1. If you recently purchased a home in New Jersey for $750,000, please press 1. If your current identity has previously been used by another person, was created before your actual date of birth, or doesn't really exist, please press 1. Congratulations! It sounds like you're the perfect candidate to receive Arkansas Obamacare. Please stay on the line, and a hardworking DHS employee will be with you as soon as possible. While you're waiting, feel free to relax as your ambitions to gainful employment fade away. PHP Parody. Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
If you want one more example as to why the elite now have a habit, they have a track record, the elite establishment, the Republicans, the status quo Democrats. If you want another example as to this habit, that we're all Republicans, we just disagree on this one issue, then why did the governor inject himself and continues to inject himself into Republican primary races in 2016 by trying to unseat, for example, he tried to unseat Representative Josh Miller, who is too conservative for the governor. Asa endorsed the challenger, made the maximum contribution to the challenger through the governor's political action committee. Why did he do that? Why did he find a primary opponent for the likes of Dan Sullivan? We also have great Republicans like Austin McCullum. Who these people get these primary opponents, or these. In some cases, you wonder if the Republicans are finding Democrat opponents for some of these people too. By the way, back in just a moment.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
Here in the next 10 years, we just spend this millions and millions and millions of dollars. It's going to be great. So back to this. Let's see. Negative effect. No statistical difference. No statistical difference. Moreover, the results also quashed a familiar caveat. Quick action closing fund subsidies also produced no meaningful job growth in counties bordering those that received funding, nullifying the idea of oft-touted spillover employment benefits. The test statistic formulations actually indicated a slightly negative effect on bordering counties for establishment growth, but not enough to be economically significant. For a program devised specifically to foster job creation, it's more than a little distressing that the research could link no county-level job growth whatsoever to its activities across a 4-year span involving tens of millions of dollars in grant giveaways. Maybe this is the corporate greed the left talks about. They take those tax subsidies and they keep them. Maybe that's how people treat money that they don't earn themselves. Right? But if you maybe I don't know. If you're just giving it away, I don't know, just a thought. Just a thought. Oh, but it's people on the right who are actually advocating giving the corporate welfare away. That's weird. Isn't that weird how the lines get blurry a little bit? Like many other states, Arkansas has legislated incentive programs at a faster rate than it has created empirical analysis and accountability, meaning we've pursued these economic development ideas, and the state themselves, they never analyze whether or not what they're doing is working. You have to have an outside group like the center, like the Mercatus Center or the Center for Research and Economics, like that. Those were, but the government's not going to. You really think? Honestly, I don't think we should expect. I wouldn't trust what the government said. If the government was doing this and came back and said, "Oh, everything's growing," I wouldn't trust their numbers. Do you expect the government to spend tens of millions of dollars giving away to private companies, taking all the credit for press conferences and stuff like that, and do you ever expect them to come back and say, "You know what? This is not working. We failed. We actually just wasted your money. There's no economic growth. The only thing that we did do is we gave away your money to, companies, private companies. It was good for them." I wonder what the campaign ratio is. I wonder if you give X amount of dollars in taxpayer subsidies and you're the politician responsible for it, then how much of that money actually winds up back in your campaign account from the business that you give the money to? I mean, it's our money, but I wonder if that ever happens. No, I bet it never happens. I'm sorry. I was assuming man's fallibility. I shouldn't do that. For a program, let's see, like many other states, Arkansas accountability measures. What study literature exists in other states has shown a murky connection at best between incentives of all sorts. The studied conclusions on enterprise zones, tax increment financing, property tax incentives, and other forms have consistently included phrases such as no noticeable impact, no evidence of positive effects, negative relationships with employment, and not effective at stimulating improvements. I thought that's what this money was supposed to do. Folks, maybe it's all one giant lie. And the next time you're at one of those press conferences or the next time you read in the paper that ASA has announced that another Chinese company is coming here and it's going to do all these amazing things, consider for a moment that it's all one giant lie and a scam. Not to mention, if they're Chinese companies, that's also the same country that's destroying churches as fast as they can. Matter of fact, you can go to Conduit for Action. We covered that story. There's also a YouTube video floating around this week about it. It really is something we need to talk about, whether or not we want to do business with people who believe that the state, essentially believe there is no God, and that the state itself is the state itself is the highest level of authority versus America, which was founded saying, no, we're not the highest authority. That
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, phone number, give us a text, phone call, 870-275-9799. Good morning, everybody. This is hour number 2. You have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. I'm Paul Harrell. This is Conduit News Radio. And we're also broadcasting over at Facebook.com/Conduit News. That's Facebook.com/Conduit News. A story from last week. These secret recordings included many officials. What secret recordings? Well, we're talking about the public corruption case of Senator John Woods, a Republican, and Republican State Representative Micah Neal, who pled guilty, like Jake Files did last week. State Representative Micah Neal last year pled guilty to taking $38,000 in kickbacks via a general improvement fund scheme, which is taxpayer money. Essentially, they were getting paid to offer access to give the grants away to organizations. And then they were laundering the money through consulting firms and things like that. Well, Micah Neal was basically pinched for this and then decided, some people say at his own direction. Others allege that the FBI was wanting him to do this as well, that he secretly recorded anyone he felt federal investigators might be interested in for most of 2016. And this is an article by Mr. Doug Thompson from the Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette. So it's interesting here. I'm just trying to think back, 2016. I mean, people were freaking out. People thought, oh my gosh, they thought everybody was wearing a wire. They didn't know who was wearing a wire. You didn't know who you could talk to unless you were honest. Everybody worried about, oh, is that guy wearing a wire? Was a dishonest person. Let me say that. And then, of course, you have all the FBI interviews. Now, here's the thing about that. Here's the thing about the FBI interviews that have been taking place. I mean, you don't want to lie to the FBI, especially when State Representative Micah Neal's been wearing a wire for an entire year. Or it wasn't actually a wire. If you read in this particular story, it was a pen. There was a, like a pen disguised as it was a microphone disguised as a pen. And it was able to record their conversations. What was Micah Neal saying in these? How obvious was the setup? Was it like, hey, you guys know anything we can do illegally to make some extra cash on the side? Yeah, absolutely, Micah. Well, we got this news scam going with Medicaid. We got this news scam going with Medicaid entities. There's this one up in Missouri, and it's amazing. Yeah. And we're gonna find a way. There's this new. Okay, do you know you can be a consultant? That's right. Do you want to be a consultant? If you want to be a consultant, we can set you up with any one of these Medicaid entities, and you can be a consultant on these Medicaid entities. And I mean, we've got a $2 billion a year program coming in here. I mean, the elites are flush with cash. Is that how the conversations went? I'm curious. I'm just snowballing here. I'm just spitballing. I'm just speculating. I'm just curious. How does that start? Do you hold up the pen like do you hold up a pen like you're on the red carpet? It's like Senator so-and-so, I'm State Representative Mike and Neil. How would you like to be rich? And you put the pen in their face. Can you speak into my pen, sir? How do you prompt that? How do you get them to? I'm just curious. What do you say? What was it like? Any state legislators out there? How many of you knew Mike O'Neill was recording your conversations? I mean, was it obvious? Feel free. You give us a call, 870-275-9799. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear from you where you're like, yeah, it was very obvious that he was recording my conversations, or he was trying to get me to say something that I shouldn't have said. Any state representatives or state senators out there that know you said something that's incriminating, give us a call. Go ahead and confess at 870-275-9799. We'll take your calls right now. And I would love to. We'll break the news. We'll get out in front of it. You can go ahead, just get the ball rolling. If you want, you're welcome to do that. This stuff you can't make up. Now, the interesting thing about this is the FBI says, in the public corruption case of John Woods, there are recordings that the prosecution apparently looks like they're going to use. And again, to repeat the conventional wisdom here, there are a lot of things in the Senator John Woods. I want to make sure everybody knows this guy was a senator, and he was responsible for a lot of pieces of legislation that I think history is going to show carved out a financial niche for himself. In the public corruption case of John Woods, normal things that you can get from the court are under seal, meaning in the pretrial process, and I'm not an attorney, okay? I'm not an attorney, which automatically should make you trust me more. I'm not an attorney, but I would just, there are normal things that you can get, you know, as a journalist, or you can research these things that you can't really get right now that are under seal. And this is what has led people to believe that when the case goes to trial, there will be more indictments. And we will wait and see. Well, I mean, because I think we can kind of connect the dots now, right? If Mike O'Neill has been recording conversations on a pen for a year, and maybe even before that, who knows? And the prosecution is going to use those recordings to sew up Senator John Woods and prove that he is in fact corrupt and that he did launder this money, as State Representative Mike O'Neill admits that he did, along with John Woods. All of that could be unveiled, and then, of course, more indictments follow. I mean, if other people have been. Now, it's important to know that according to Mike O'Neill, he says, and maybe this is to keep some people from, looking at property in Ecuador, but it's important to understand that State Representative Mike O'Neill says that the other recordings he made, the FBI wasn't interested in them. So two things. He's being told to say that to keep people in the United States, or Mike O'Neill just really wanted to do some extra homework to just make sure he doesn't go to jail. Is he going to go to jail? Just going to be on house arrest, wear an ankle bracelet? Have some parole? Does he go to jail? Well, I mean, same thing for Jake Files. How long is Jake Files? We need to start a pool. How long is Jake Files going to go to jail? Honestly, is it 18 months? I mean, he pled guilty. So who's he testifying against? Has Jake Files been wearing a wire? Now if Jake Files is wearing a wire, people are in trouble. let me tell you. I wonder how that conversation's initiated. Jake Files wearing a wire. Hey, you want to know how to make some extra money? Well, yeah, you tell me, Jake. You should know. People are preceded by their reputation at the Marble Palace. You have to understand this, ladies and gentlemen. Telephone number is 870-275-9799. Speaking of Jake Files, this from Talk Business and Politics, Michael Tilley, that former state representative Denny Altis is planning to seek election to the Senate, that the seat that was vacated by Jake Files in his resignation. Of course, he still hasn't resigned yet, right? He doesn't resign until the 8th. He had some loose ends to tie up when he announced his resignation after taking that plea last week. We did a segment where we highlighted some people saying that this is unconstitutional, that Jake Files can't admit to a crime and remain in office, that when he admits to the crime, that is his resignation. So the question is, what loose ends? What are we talking about? Benefits? Are we talking about a paycheck? He's not owed another dime as far as I'm concerned. I don't care what he's done. Or what... I do care what he's done, but you know what I mean? I don't care if he's, well, I went to this committee meeting and I need some per diem. So, Denny Altis was a state representative. I'm going to tell you one of the biggest things that Denny Altis did, which makes me have, honestly, in this day and age, just a ton of respect for him. But anyway, the process for replacing Jake Files, according to Talk Business and Politics, begins with Governor Hutchinson asking the two major political parties if they want to have a convention or a special election to fill the vacancy. If a convention is agreed to by the two parties, then the governor sets a special date or sets a date for a special general election to fill out the remainder of Files' term, which would be through the end of this year. If a primary is requested by one of the parties, then both have to abide by that decision. It's likely that at least one of the parties will call for a special election, which means an election calendar will have to be established for a special primary. So we still don't know all of that stuff. But Denny Altis, okay. And also, by the way, you know who else is considering running for this? Joey McCutcheon, Fort Smith attorney Joey McCutcheon is considering running. According, I think I saw that. I'm not going to cite it because I can't remember where I saw that reported. But Joey McCutcheon says he is considering running for this. I think, the more the merrier, personally. But Denny Altis, state representative from, let's see here, 99 to 2003. And then represented, it says Senate District 13 from 2003 to 2011. Then he returned to the House of Representatives in 2011, represented the 76th District until January 2015. Altis has also served 2 stints with the Sebastian County Quorum Court. Denny Altis was the sponsor of what became Act 746. This was a bill that made minor edits to our gun laws, but had amazing results. It was a bill supported by Democrats and Republicans, passed by Democrats and Republicans, but the minor edits that were made, they crossed out this word and that word, they underlined and added this word and that word, and all of a sudden, possession of a firearm in this state was decriminalized. I almost said forever, but you never know what the establishment elite are going to try to do, what they've already tried to do. They want to weaken Act 746 because basically it gives you the right to protect yourself. It decriminalized the possession of a gun in order to possess, in order for them to convict you of a gun crime. Now they have to prove a whole lot more, like what you were thinking when you were carrying your weapon. Denny Altis did this. Keep in mind, you know who signed this law? This bill into law? Governor Mike Beebe. These guys didn't read it. And the reason I think that's kind of funny is the Democrats are okay for the most part with the status quo of not reading legislation, and Republicans are too, especially the majority leader of the Republican Senate, because he tends to get more of what he wants and what his uncle wants. But I'll tell you this, with Denny Altis, it's like he kind of used the status quo against the status quo. He counted on the fact they weren't going to actually read what this bill was going to do. And they didn't look at this. I guarantee you most of them didn't even read the second section of the law, which just changed this word and that word, and boom, all of a sudden, prosecutors have a much higher burden and standard of proof if you're carrying a weapon. Mike Beebe signed it. That's what's so hilarious. Allowing for open carry, making us a constitutional carry state. That's what Denny Altis did when he was in there. And only reason I say that is because I know the folks listening online and other places will remember that. So, anyway, we got to take a break. We got a great rest of the show for you. We're going to dive into some minutia on the, remember the military retirement, quote, tax cut, end quote. Was it really a tax cut? I'll talk more about that at 7:33. Don't go anywhere. Back in a minute.
In a world full of constituents with social media accounts, bloggers just looking to increase their page views, and a talk radio host who generally is just the worst, how are Little Rock's elite supposed to conduct business with such a lack of privacy? Introducing the 1835 Club, older and more refined than other clubs that claim discretion. The 1835 Club is for seasoned political veterans that want to conduct the highest form of aristocratic business with the public's money. Are you a schemer? Do you someday want a guaranteed flow of taxpayer money to support your business? Is it your dream to see the .gov domain at the end of your business website? Don't listen to the imitators. The 1835 Club is the place where corrupt politicians and businessmen hatch their next crony schemes. At the 1835 Club, we make lobbying safe and legal. Ethics. Why, of course. All business is done in an ethical manner. Just look for the sign above the door that reads, loophole. Are you tired of the Capitol Police restricting your access to the roof after a perfectly good night of drinking? The 1835 Club has libations and a perfectly good roof. Other crony clubs that promise discretion try to lure you in by advertising bars made out of aeroplanes. Well, at the 1835 Club, instead of an airplane fuselage, we've got a space shuttle. No, not a bar. We've got an actual space shuttle that makes a daily run to the moon so members of the 1835 Club can have some real privacy away from the bloggers and taxpayers. Are you an Arkansas aristocrat? Do you want to be? It's the 1835 Club, and we work tirelessly to make sure the good old boy system remains alive and well. Join today.
Disclaimer. The 1835 Club reserves the right to deny membership to anyone who has principles. Any talk of the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution must be done in jest or, at the very least, with a condescending tone. And finally, the 1835 Club will be given a 25% commission of any agreements made between politicians and the business community.
PHP Parody. Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, sorry, folks. Welcome back to the program. I was just reading this case. I just thought this was interesting. Dave Hughes reported this was earlier in the year. See, we have people that were bitten by rats. Did you see that? I saw Joe Churchwell talking about this on his Facebook page. A total failure of DCFS. Now, DCFS, the Department of Child and Family Services, which anytime I talk about the DCFS, I will get inundated with text messages and phone calls of people with horror stories. And the reason you have horror stories is because this government agency assumes that you are guilty of abusing your child with, at best, circumstantial evidence. At best. And it's really quite crazy. It's like they don't have common sense. As any sort of policing force, they don't have common sense. Like, if you're really abusing a child, are you going to take him to the hospital where you can get caught? Most people know that the abuse is wrong, and it actually disincentivizes. It's like if your child, like I'm a new father, like I'm a first time dad. It's got a 7-month-old. It's the 5th, so yeah, it's officially 7 months today. 7-month-old little girl, and I remember I had a close friend who had family, and something happened, and their daughter or son or something was on the bed, fell off the bed, broke her arm, took the baby to the hospital. I think it was a toddler at the time, and the DCF gets notified, and for 6 months or more, I mean, their life was made a living hell for just a common accident. And this happens all the time. And then you have these ridiculous failures where you have something like the Stanley case, where there's an email exonerating the Stanley family, and it gets dismissed. Now, thanks to Senator Alan Clark, we found that out, and Representative Kim Hammer. They did a great job. Of course, Alan Clark was then not given his chairmanship of that committee, Joint Performance Review, because he actually discovered something that made the governor's office look bad because there was a cover-up. These people had an email that they deleted that exonerated the Stanley family, and the caseworker was moved to another case and told not to talk to anybody or she'd lose her job. That's the Chicago way here in Arkansas. But Joe Churchwell, and we interviewed Mr. Churchwell last week talking about a failure of DCFS, and how that the teenage parents were actually products of the foster care system, and it has to do with kids getting basically put in a rat house. So and it's even worse than that. But I was tagged in this post. An infant left the hospital in her care before she kicked him to the street 3 days later. They were then taken to the rat shack by the Magnolia police. Anyway, he calls out Amy Webb for DCFS, saying, any comment on this? So, anyway, very interesting stuff here. Of course, I mean, in it's cases like this where you say, well, we do need to have some recourse, right? We do need to have some recourse with being able to sue the state, but now with the sovereign immunity that's been applied to the state by the Supreme Court, I mean, you can say what you want. And I said from the beginning, it's refreshing to go in the Constitution and see it very plain, the state shall not, and it's refreshing to see a ruling like that. I know some people would disagree with me, but it's refreshing to see somebody say, this is the plain reading of the text, this is what we're going to do. But at the same time, there's no question that before the ruling, Arkansans had rights, and after the ruling, we don't have the right to sue. And the government, we know as conservatives, does wrong. We know that the government many times they claim they have the best interests of us at heart, but they really have themselves. The government entity itself must be protected at all costs. Anyway, we've got to go to break. We've got half an hour left, and when we come back, let's get into it, shall we? Let's get into the math. Let's get into the math of the military retirement tax cut. We'll be back in a moment. Our rights come from God, a creator, who is sovereign over this world. Totally different things. Let's see here. Oh, but Dana Kelly does say this. It does not disparage the original good intentions of incentive programs like Quick Action Closing Fund to wonder aloud after a decade's time if there's not a better way to incite job creation in Arkansas. Perhaps the first step would be to bring a more rigid structure to front-end analysis with some sort of job creation index. It could statistically account for the fact not all jobs created are equal, even if the wage is. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are different ideas about this, but the only thing this ignores is what I'm bringing up. What I'm bringing up is they're taking your taxpayer money and getting political capital from it. Before any job gets, quote, created. And by the way, the whole problem is if a new factory goes in St. Francis County, how many of the jobs that are going to fill that are from people who are sitting on their couch right now just watching television? And the answer is very little. Very few people are actually. So there's actually no jobs created. Those jobs are going to come from people who are already working. Those, quote, jobs people are already in the workforce. And so you're just switching employers. You're just, shuffling around employees. That is the issue. That is the issue. So, anyway, it is good that Dana D. Kelly wrote this piece, though, on this information by Jacob Bundrick and Dr. Snyder, because it does just bring more attention to the fact that this whole thing is just, not working. Government doesn't create jobs. I know they want to. I know the Chamber of Commerce, you guys really want the government to be able to create jobs. This whole system is only good for politicians that want to use your money to get positive press out of it, and the Chamber of Commerce that no longer stands up for small business and instead is just, basically just nursing on the government as long as they possibly can. Chamber of Commerce, folks, is a joke. They're an absolute joke now. They don't care about you, small business owner, right? What do? They put on, a job fair or something, or they put on like a business expo a couple times a year. That's all they do. And that's just peanuts. They don't care. They really want to have a meeting with the governor. They want to have a meeting with Mike Preston. They want to have a meeting with these guys that can, and then you got the chamber leaders who they like the positive press. They like to be able to say, they love to hear, I really want to thank so-and-so from the local Chamber of Commerce and hear the governor say that. Yeah, instrumental in helping us move this thing along and, be the mover and shaker that got this Chinese factory to commit to come here and give us, 75 jobs in the next 15,000.
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Yeah, the special election up in Russellville area, that's Senate District 16, that is coming, the early voting starting tomorrow morning. So that's very, very interesting. You've got a three-way Republican race between Bob Bailey, who is, he's the only one that hasn't been given money by Asa in the Republican race. Breanne Davis and Luke Heffley have been given money by Asa, and Bob Bailey has not. Bob Bailey does not support the governor's agenda. And Breanne Davis and Luke Heffley appear to, in relation, and Luke Heffley's been on the program. He's a very nice guy, but he appears to believe that ACE's work requirements and everything else are going to work. Oh, by the way, did you see that piece in the Gazette last week? We're going to cover that probably tomorrow. That piece in the Gazette where they did say, and I missed it. I was speculating what I was hearing, and I guess I was hearing somebody that had read the piece and I didn't read it. But that piece in the Gazette that actually said that Asa says his waiver is going to be approved by the Trump administration, but they may not get everything they want at first. So they may get the work requirements, and I'm telling you what I'm hearing is that what they're not going to get is the 138% decrease down to 100% of poverty, which means that we're not talking about this being less expensive like we were being promised. So it just goes to show you that even when the fiscal reality doesn't work out, they still don't really believe it's fiscally unsustainable. They don't really want to end the program. If I'm right, it's still a speculation. We don't know what we're going to get and what we are going to get. So, okay, moving on. Special election is coming up. Early voting starts tomorrow in that race, and we'll be talking, I'm sure, with Bob Bailey tomorrow as special early voting kicks off tomorrow. Back on November 6th, conduitforaction.org, this headline, lying by omission. Legislators brag on military retirement bill, but omit it raised the tax burden. Now, that is a claim. That is a true statement, but that true statement, some don't believe that true statement. One in particular would be Senator Jim Hendren, the governor's nephew number one. He does not believe that that's the case. He maintains that the military retirement tax cut was in fact revenue neutral, that it was a tax shifting concept. Which, hey, I'm really glad to at least get him to admit. If that's the reality he wants to believe, that in and of itself is not a good thing, because it shows that you just can't shrink government, that you want everything to balance out and just be a shell game and decrease the military retirees' taxes, but increase taxes on everybody else that buys candy and soda and, buys books on the internet and things like that. But Senator Jim Hendren is wrong. Let's get to the claim first, or let's get to the true statement first, shall we? Skipping on down here. The military retirement pay exemption was passed as HB 1164 last year by Representative Charlene Fite. It became Act 141 of 2017. The new law does cut taxes on military retirement pay, exempting the retirement pay from the Arkansas income tax. That is estimated to cost the state $6.7 million when it takes effect. Then $13.4 million the next year when it takes effect. The benefit to veterans with military retirement pay is the only part politicians want to talk about. What they don't want to talk about is the offset. And what they also don't want to talk about is the increased money that is now going to government. And I'll explain the shell game they're playing now, where I don't even know how they can claim that they're doing this. I'll tell you here in a minute. It's actually a $5.9 million tax increase on Arkansans. The government is getting $5.9 million more than they would have if this bill hadn't passed. According to the legislature's nonpartisan Bureau of Legislative Research, beginning in fiscal year 2019, the legislation will collect $5.9 million more than any tax cuts provided in the legislation. For fiscal year 2018, the legislation will collect $3 million more than it gives in tax benefits. The bill is a tax increase, so where does the money go? The money goes to Medicaid. Something called the Medicaid Trust Fund. So the excess revenue that they got off the military tax cut gets transferred into the Medicaid Trust Fund. And this is where the legislative sleight of hand is occurring. You see, the Medicaid Trust Fund is not a part of the general revenue. Well, let me say that again. The Medicaid Trust Fund is not a part of the general revenue. So if they get $5.9 million more, but then they transfer it into the Medicaid Trust Fund, they're able to say that as far as the general revenue fund is concerned, that everything balances out and there are no more taxes gained, no more taxes lost, and it balances out, it's revenue neutral. As long as they transfer the more money they took from us to this other fund, this essentially other bank account. Let me explain it to you this way. Joe, will you go to my tweets over the weekend? I actually don't have them up. But yesterday, go to the very bottom. Let's see, keep going. Right there. Let's go to the first question. Yeah, the question. So I wrote this question: when a business owner makes a profit and draws it out of his company bank account and puts it in his personal account, can he then tell the IRS he doesn't owe taxes on it because it no longer is in his company account? Now, I will just tell you, I can't do that. I can't draw something out of LLC, put it in my personal account, and say, "Yep, the company didn't make that." Yeah, you can't do that. I'm going to have to file my taxes at some point, right? So that's an interesting analogy. Well, it's completely applicable here, unless we're talking about government. And go to my next tweet. Instead of talking about tax, cuts. Instead of talking about income, if we're talking about revenue generation or revenue collection, most people would say that previous scenario is tax evasion. That's what I wrote. Now go to the next one. But if the scenario is slightly different, and instead of taxes owed, the subject shifts to revenue collected by the government, then the state would claim revenue neutrality. Now, what if I told that to the IRS? What if I made this money here in my company account, I transfer it over to my bank account, and I tell the IRS, no, that's actually neutral. It's revenue neutrality. They're going to say, no, you still owe taxes on that. That still counts. Go to my next tweet. However, in this scenario, the people, and this is what we're talking about now, the people would correctly understand this is actually a tax increase. If the government gets more money, it's a tax increase. Claiming it's revenue neutral because government takes the increase and puts it in a trust fund is bogus. It's absolutely bogus. Now, let me show you, let's go to the photo, that one right there. All right. So this is in carefully crafted language. This is a legislative impact statement on Charlene Fight's bill that Senator Jim Hendren, wholeheartedly supported. Senator Hendren took to the Senate floor and actually really politicized people's opposition to new taxes. Politicized the veterans. The veterans were used as a political football with this whole thing anyway. But he said, you don't want to tax on your Pokemon download, and you're basically against the troops because you don't want a new digital downloads tax. I mean, it was really, well, I mean, it's just a deviation from principle. I don't know what to tell you in terms of. I mean, I thought we were against creating more forms for government, more ways for government to tax us, and people who are platform Republicans, that's what they are. And Jim Hendren used to say, he used to actually come out and before his uncle was governor, and he tried to, defund Arkansas Works at one time, and he led a whole press conference of people trying to do that. And then of course we have his famous speech. Now that we're in the majority, when we were in the minority, it didn't really care what we filed because it wasn't going to pass. But now, now that Ace is governor and blah, 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 blah. I mean, it's really, really sad. This is the revenue impact, but you've got to read between the lines if you want to know what this is actually doing. Now, Joe, feel free. Can you highlight on there? I don't know if you can highlight on a photo or not. Okay. Let's just take the fiscal year 2018 impact statement. Notice very clear revenue impact, specifically impact to general revenues. Okay? General revenues. The military retirement income tax exemption cost the state $6.7 million. So you already start at a negative $6.7 million. You are $6.7 million in the hole. Then they decide to tax unemployment compensation, which in fiscal year 2018, their prediction is that's going to get them $1.6 million. Okay, so you start out negative $6.7 million, you add $1.6 million to that, you're still in the hole a little bit. Okay, But then they're going to levy a 6.5% sales tax, the full sales tax on candy and soda. Okay, it was actually lowered because the grocery tax is lowered, but they're going to tax candy and soda at the full 6.5%, which, by the way, the only way they get away with that is because they're being progressive liberals, and they think, well, candy and soda is bad for you, and so we need to incentivize blah, 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 blah. I mean, it's the equivalent of Obama taxing sunbeds to pay for Obamacare. It was a sin tax. Well, tanning beds are bad for you, and so we want to disincentivize it. Let people make their own decisions and just give them and quit trying to social engineer things. Well, maybe people. That's where ideas like that come from the left that try to control and manipulate the population. I'm just telling you that's the way it is. Whether that was their intention or not, that's why they put stuff like that into bills. There's a reason smokers are the most demonized section of our entire population. So anyway, they say that's going to get them $6.9 million. Okay, all right. So again, you started negative 6.7 plus 1.6 million plus 6.9 million. Then they get another $1.2 million on digital products, meaning if you download a digital book or a ringtone, and I'm told also other things that they're probably not telling us about. That's going to generate another $1.2 million. And then they take all of that and then they transfer. Now listen to this. They transfer $3 million from general revenue. Well, no, it's at this point, look at where they are. Where does that $3 million come from? They're saying that then you need to subtract $3 million because it goes into the Medicaid trust fund to offset things. Yeah. And, they're saying the soda tax goes to Medicaid trust, whatever. Anyway, later on in the week, I'm going to get even more into this. My point is... is we are to believe that because this $3 million that you see on your screen here, general revenue reduction, but it's how is it? It's being subtracted from the state general revenue budget, the general revenue fund, but it's not a negative because it's $3 million that's just being transferred. It says transfer to Medicaid to offset reduction of soft drink. It's going somewhere, meaning it is a tax increase. It's a tax increase. Just because you transfer it out of the general revenue budget into a Medicaid. And by the way, keep in mind, it's going towards Medicaid, which is, again, the reason they raise taxes on anything these days. And you can go read the bills. The bills say plainly that this money is going into Medicaid. This money shall be allocated for Medicaid. But they claim it's revenue neutral. But if it's revenue neutral, where's that $3 million going? It's only revenue neutral if you ignore. It's only revenue neutral if you only look at the general revenue. But they're actually getting more money from us. They're getting more money to fund government. It's just going into trust fund. And by the way, does anyone really? Can we rename that? Can we not allow politicians to call it a trust fund? That's ridiculous. We don't trust you with our money, and we're not going to trust you more because you say, well, it's not a tax increase because it's going in a trust fund. I mean, come on. That's red flags all over the place. Red flags all over the place. We don't trust you with our money, period. I trust you less when you say you're putting my money into a trust fund. There's a reason we want you out of office. Good grief. Anyway, Senator Jim Hendren is, he's put out this graphic, and actually, we're not going to get to the graphic today. I'm going to get to this graphic later in the week, but he's put out a graphic, and he put it out a long time ago, actually. Nobody noticed it. He for some reason, he feels the need to bring this back up as if it's getting traction. See, these guys are reacting to this. Someone probably randomly liked it. These guys, yeah. Someone probably, they're starting to react to this. And matter of fact, I was talking to somebody the other day that people were asking, how's the morning show going? And, one of the reasons we moved the program from the afternoon to the mornings was because we had an opportunity to be on, in the Little Rock area and beyond. And we are thrilled to be on 96.5 The Answer, 96.5 FM The Answer. The thing is, people ask me, how's it going? People in the Liberty Movement ask me, how's it going? They ask, how effective. And I will just tell you this. Let me report to you. We're actually being we're very effective. We're very effective. But the ironic thing is, it is extremely advantageous to be on in Little Rock because it's the largest market. It's one station now covering the largest market in the state of Arkansas, and that's great. But the real advantage is? It's actually the smallest market. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, it dawned on me. We are engaged, you and me, people trying to build this Liberty machine. Now that we're on inside the sphere of the Marble Palace elites, this is now a psychological assault, if you will, on their way of thinking. And when I say the smallest market, what I mean is there is really a very small minority of people, I have come to believe, whose minds that we have to convince, and maybe we don't. And if we can't convince them, then that's where the large market comes in, and we can vote them all out of office. Isn't it great? But you would be amazed. The smaller a group is, and the more complicated knowledge of this issue or that issue is, the more opportunity for corruption, and in the case of disseminating talking points, the more opportunity for being able to mislead and misdirect your base. And that is what's gone on for a very long time at the Marble Palace with the Republican Party establishment and how they control. And I really, really want you to understand something, Representative or Senator. You guys, if you're not in the in crowd, but you do kind of vote with them sometimes, they have meetings about what to tell you to control you. No, and they're meetings outside of the email chains that you get that make you feel included. They're meetings outside of the text message chain that you're on that make you feel included as a caucus. No. There are meetings about, well, how do we get these people? And then they craft the talking points, and then they tell you, and then you come and you regurgitate them, and yet they are easily defeated. And we tell you how to defeat those arguments on programs like this one, and we just did. And we just did in this segment on something that is now up for debate again because the establishment doesn't like being called liberals when it comes to fiscal issues. They don't like to be called tax increasers, and they especially don't like it when they themselves are military retirement, like Jim Hendren is, who voted for this bill, which he will benefit from. There were some military retirees that didn't vote yea or nay. They recused themselves because they didn't want to vote on something that they personally were going to benefit from, by the way, in the House. And the Senate votes are a lot more precious, though. The point being, there is a very small amount of people that are actually making these decisions. And people have asked me in the Liberty Movement, are you more effective? And I will say, yeah, just for the psychological component of getting our message out and potentially affecting, well, that's not what I heard from leadership. And then here's the bonus, and this is the biggest bonus of all, and it's you all, not just in Little Rock, but it's everybody in Jonesboro, it's everybody in the River Valley, Russellville area, Stuttgart, Fort Smith, Rogers. It's all of you guys, because then they think this. Because, see, if we don't convince them with the limited government argument, they start to think, uh-oh, how many other people are listening to this and are hearing this for the first time, and am I going to get phone calls about this?
Or am I going to get a primary because of this? Am I going to get voted out of office because of this? Is there going to be a Facebook post that somebody posts that goes viral because of this? And that is the benefit, that is the value of this, the type of activism that we're engaging in. And I'm going to tell you this one more time. If conservative, limited government cannot work and be implemented in Arkansas, we have no business trying to implement it in Washington, D.C. This is the government that's closer to us. It should answer to us a lot more than it does now. So we're going to continue shining the light of truth. It's going to be irritating to these people, but we're going to continue doing it because I believe it's the right thing to do. We have to take a break. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. I'm Paul Harrell.
Buy, sell, and trade at Triple R Pawn in Ash Flat. Firearms, computers, sporting goods, musical instruments, tools, jewelry, and everything else you can think of. It's all at Triple R Pawn at the Light in Ash Flat. Gun enthusiasts, log on now to triplrpawn.com and browse their amazing inventory. That's triplrpawn.com. You can also call them at 870-994-PAWN. That's 870-994-7296. Let the great team at Triple R Pawn help you find what you're looking for. That's Triple R Pawn at the Light in Ash Flat, triplrpawn.com, or call 870-994-PAWN.
If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, that about wraps things up for us on this Monday morning. It was a good Super Bowl to kind of, complete the, we opened with the Super Bowl. We're closing with the Super Bowl. Philadelphia Eagles winning their first. That was incredible to me. I had no idea. And, honestly, I didn't really pay as close of attention to the Super Bowl as I should have. I'm sure, whatever. I didn't realize that was the first time they've ever won.
And the Eagles quarterback was the first ever quarterback to receive a touchdown in the Super Bowl.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is he the one that said after football he wants to be a pastor?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that was him. It's really good. Not just the pastor part, but just when he expanded on what his faith means to him. It was biblically profound. Folks, have a great Monday. Thanks for starting it with us here at the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. My name's Paul Harrell. This is Conduit News Radio. Be safe, Arkansas.